Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm a director and producer at StoryKeep. And outside of my work at StoryKeep, I'm also a director and producer for documentary films. One of the most recent projects that I was lucky enough to work on with StoryKeep was a full-length feature film about a family's history and the origins of their family business. In addition to the feature film that we created, we also decided a really valuable addition to this project would be to create short video portraits that highlighted each elder and their own life philosophy. One of the moments that stood out to me the most was working with one of the elders where she was really able to get into a space to be able to reflect on the seasons of her own life and how those seasons shaped her values. And those values were not just passed down within her own family, but the larger family as a whole. And I really think that the space that we were able to create within that process was a way for her to dig into memories and a past that we wouldn't have necessarily been able to capture in the larger film. So if this is interesting to you or a family you support, we'd love to hear from you.
Welcome to Who We Remember. I'm Jamie Younger, the founder of StoryKeep, and your host for this podcast. Please let me just say how delighted I am to have you join us for the show. This is a place where we have uncommon conversations about things that matter deeply to most of us, the people we love, and the purpose that we give to our own lives and legacies. Our mission at StoryKeep is to capitalize on the power of story for profound good in families of wealth. We've partnered with over 100 families worldwide, creating personal films and private podcasts that help a family navigate their shared narrative. Our work is designed to deepen connections. My conversations on this podcast center around two questions. The first, whose life story from your family would you most want to see documented on film? And the second, what are you as a person and as a professional hoping to create and leave behind? Today, I'm honored to welcome Perry Gladstone. Perry is a confidential advisor to exceptional leaders, guiding them to reconnect with the core truth that has quietly powered them since childhood. He's known for his clarity, his courage, and his refusal to be driven by applause or title. Perry once blacked out 120 feet underwater while freediving, a moment that nearly ended everything, but instead launched a profound shift in how he lives and leads. Today, his work is about helping others live in full alignment with who they really are, not what the world expects. Perry is here to speak about his father, Al Gladstone, a man affectionately known as the king of folk dance and a master of engagement and community connection. Al was a cultural catalyst who created shared experiences through movement, conversation, and an endless curiosity about people. On weekends, Perry and Al would garage sale hunt on Saturdays and then sell their finds at the flea market on Sundays. Always more about the connection than the cash. Perry tells beautiful stories about his dad showing up without question in moments of need, finding joy in the smallest human interactions, and building a flea market stall that ran on banter and bargaining. But perhaps the most moving memory is one of the simplest: time spent together in a cluttered, dark artist studio where Perry felt for the first time that he belonged entirely. Please settle in for this heartfelt and revealing conversation with Perry Gladstone as we explore the enduring influence of his dad and the legacy that Perry continues to shape in his life and work. Perry, it is genuinely so delightful to be with you and to talk again. So thanks for joining me for this kind of special conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm so pleased to do this with you.
Yeah. So I'm always intrigued, as you can imagine, who a guest who I've known in other contexts, who they choose that they want to talk about on the podcast. And, the answer to the question, whose life story from your own family would you most want to see documented on film? And I was intrigued to see that you chose your dad, Al. So can you introduce us to your dad? Where was he born? When was he born? And paint a picture for us of your dad.
Okay. I was born in Toronto, here where I am now based, and from, in 1930. And I understand it was shortly after his parents arrived in the country from the old country. They didn't like to talk about specifically where they were from.
Oh no. Okay, interesting.
Uh, Most of the family ended up in Chicago, and my dad's mother and father were here or came here. So
Did you eventually find out where they were from, or is that still a mystery to you?
it isn't. It isn't. No, it's not a mystery. I did find out, and this is a whole story on its own, which I could talk about forever. But shortly before my dad passed, which was 2 years ago this spring, we, being my wife and son and I, and my dad's wife, decided that we would go back to where he was from,
Oh,
and we would
wow.
find the town and, hopefully
Mm.
reconnect to his roots. And we knew that it was likely going to be his last trip.
Yeah.
Um, and and so we did make that trek, and it did not go well.
Mm.
There
Mm.
was just this incredible amount of, and this was such a lesson for me, generational trauma that he had absorbed from
Yeah.
the history of the family and that time and place in the world, specifically them being Jewish and coming from um, Poland, eastern part of Poland and near Russia.
Yeah.
So, as I said, without getting into a whole digression here, they left. They left for a reason. They weren't safe, and
Mm.
I don't think they ever did feel safe. And I don't think my dad ever truly felt safe. And so when we went back there, all of that came out. It was a very powerful and a very powerful trip in a lot of ways. I
Mm.
learned a lot about
Mhm.
my father that I
Yeah.
didn't know before.
Wow. Wow.
So,
So, well, that gives us a little bit of framework and context for what kind of guy he was, because he was, I mean, you've shared a few things like he was really into folk dance and he was really into
mhm.
fishing, and I'm like, I have this picture of this, um, I don't know, like almost this Renaissance man who had full of
Mm.
life but also angst. And how would you describe him?
Yeah, I mean, why did I start this way? That really is true. My father was this incredible connector of people and community. He had this innate ability to understand how culture is cultivated from shared experience and to be the catalyst for that shared experience. And as I watched him through my own growth and development, I didn't understand it, of course, at the beginning of what he was doing and how he did it and why. I was just around it, and it was just a normal thing. He was the king of folk dancing in Canada, and he ran folk dance groups all over the place at the YMCA's around the town. He was part of the community, is part of the community across the country. He spent the greater part of his of early 20s and into his 20s traveling all over the world and collecting folk dancing and dances and meeting people and absorbing their culture and their stories. And he brought all of that back. And through the late 60s and through the 70s, folk dancing was a movement. There was a
Yeah,
community around that, and he
it's
was the
huge.
center of all of it.
Huh.
So um, that was the medium that he used to get people together and connect them and find that, like I said, create that shared experience. And that's who he was. And as
Mm.
I said earlier, I didn't know that there was this undercurrent, this other layer to him that was more fear-based. And I think he was using this to stay safe in a lot of ways.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
boy, did he have impact. I mean, on so many people in so many ways.
You mean in creating safe spaces of community for others?
Ostensibly, yes. If not to be reductionary, but I think it kind of comes down to that, right? Like fear and love, and are we in a mode of expansion or contraction?
Yeah.
And I think in response to a lot of the unspoken and unresolved tension or fear in the family,
Mm.
he found a way to express that. He found a way to make it okay for people.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Wow. Um, what did he do for work? Like was that the main part of his life was folk dance, or were there other elements? Like I'm just want to fill the picture in a bit.
Yeah. He got a job in government. If I remember correctly, somewhere around 19 years old. He may have dropped out of school. He got a job at customs, and that was where he met his first mentor. And this was a gentleman who was very well read and understood politics and the arts and science and many different things. And so my dad's real education came under the wing of this guy that he worked with.
Hmm.
And they kept trying to promote my dad, and he never really wanted the promotion. He wanted to hang out in the customs warehouse with this guy and just continue his mentorship. And from the stories my dad told me, I don't remember the gentleman's name. This was the person who really encouraged him to go out into the world and travel and experience and see. So he left that job and did the traveling I mentioned earlier. Um, Came back with this library of information, songs and dances and lyrics and all of the stuff that he was so excited about. He had quite this amazing collection of records. And that's when his folk dancing started. There was a small group of people that were into it. There were other people like him that really were more than aficionados. I mean, people who really wanted to carry this torch. And they formed groups, and it turned into a whole movement. So
Hmm.
his profession really was as a folk dance teacher, augmented by selling stuff at the flea market. So
Yes.
that was the time I spent with my father was on weekends. We weren't in the same house together. My parents split when I was certainly, I think, about one and
Yeah.
1 year old. And so my time with my dad weekends was Saturdays. He would pick me up Saturday morning and he would have the garage sale section of the newspaper already like marked of
Yeah. Yeah.
what order we were going to go across the city. And so this is what I grew up with. It was Saturday mornings was dad time, going to flea market, going to garage sales, buying junk.
Yeah.
For me, it was comic books. And then on Sundays, he had a table at the flea market, and we would set up shop and spend the day doing that. So that's partly how he made his money. And also, as it turns out, he was subsidized by his mother, who always seemed to have a way to help him.
Mhm.
Um, then by the time I'm trying to think of what point in his life, somewhere around his 40s, he got a job with the Board of Education teaching dancing. So this
Mhm.
was sort of part of the adult education component of the Board of Education. And so he got into the board, he got a pension, and he did that for 20 plus years.
Wow.
So it's kind of a strange arc.
Yeah, but as I hear you share these small, big details about him, I can see why you would want to document his life story because there's so much color and it sounds
Yeah.
like there's a lot of missing pieces too, potentially in your mind.
I think yes, to both of those things. My dad, I don't see them as secrets, more of the way that he navigated his life was so inspiring in so many ways. It helped me understand, and a lot of people understand that you really can craft the life you believe in, that it's important to, follow your bliss in a sense, but more importantly, to be true to yourself. And I think my dad went through a constant evolution of what that meant for him.
And you
And
and
in a
you
lot
you
of,
watch that. Yeah.
you're right. And then at the same time, he had these very powerful, I almost want to call them compulsions, where things like the flea market provided again, like the folk dancing, it was a medium, it was a vehicle. So it
Hmm.
wasn't about the flea market. It wasn't about buying and selling things. In fact, I, again, I have very vivid memories of events that took place, specific times where I thought we were selling things, but that wasn't really what it was about. This was just a way for him to connect with people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love this story that you shared with me earlier about how um he just wouldn't tell someone a price because
Oh.
then they would just buy it and walk away. And he, like, wanted to keep the conversation. Like, did he
Yeah.
tell you that, or that's just your observation of what happened?
Okay. I didn't really understand what was happening until I was in my 30s, but I couldn't have been more than 8 years old. And because this happened all the time, but there was a very specific event, or at least the first time it really hit me. So my dad drank a lot of coffee, and so one of the things that would happen on Sundays is he'd go get a coffee. First of all, it was me going, and then as I was a little bit older, like 8, old enough to man the booth,
Right.
he would go get his own coffee, and of course that would be my opportunity to sell something too, other than the
Huh.
comic books I had at the end of the table. And Um, and so he would go and sell a coffee, or sorry, go get a coffee and come back. And I'd be, Dad, look, I sold this and this and this, and here's the money. And he would be upset, not angry with me, but frustrated because now he had one less thing to play with, right? To get people's
Huh.
attention. So the story is this: someone, and again, this played out several times, but this one particular case, someone comes to the booth and they pick up this amber necklace that he'd been carrying around for years. And they said, "Oh, this is beautiful. How much is it?" And my dad said, "Do you know what that is?" And they said, "Well, it looks like amber." "Yes, it's amber, and it comes from this river, and da 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 da." And he told this whole story. And that person said, "Well, great. How much? And how much is it?" And then he went into another diatribe about this and that. And so the person would get more and more frustrated. And eventually, they started getting angry, and they were saying, "Well, tell me the price." And like he just refused to do it. And I was standing beside him and I was poking him and sell it like they want to buy it.
Come on.
Because
If
I
there was
thought we were
ever
there
a
to sell
coffee with
stuff.
someone wants to buy it, I think this is it. Yeah.
And he just wouldn't go there. And the person really got angry and like
Mm.
exploded and it turned into an argument. And um, the next time it happened, and I got angry at him too. And so that kind of was the beginning of this whole dynamic that we had between us as well, was because I didn't understand what he was really up to, which was to engage with people, to hold their attention as long as possible.
Hmm.
That's what he craved. That's what he needed.
Hmm.
Another time somebody came and same necklace, same story. And this time he said, $2,000. And they said, "Are you out of your mind?" Right. But again, he had no intention of selling it. He just wanted to keep it going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that was the event. And as I said, much, much later, I came to the conclusion of what he was really up to.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you point to such an interesting thing, which is that so much of the time, especially with our parents, sometimes grandparents, that what is
Mhm.
happening we don't understand. And then later
Right.
in hindsight, we feel like we get it. Sometimes we have the chance to speak with the person about it to confirm. Um, but we're sort of left with still kind of
Yeah.
scratching our heads and hence wanting to maybe
Sure.
spend time
We
documenting them,
want our
talking
parents
about
to
them.
be our parents, right?
Yeah.
We want them to meet our needs, and they're busy meeting their own. And
Indeed. Indeed.
that's like welcome to why everyone needs therapy. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
yeah.
so tell me, this could be a question, this could be another story about your dad's life, but um, if you had the opportunity to, not necessarily yourself, but having an outside party document your dad's life story,
Mm.
What do you still want asked?
Ooh, boy, what a question. This is very personal. And Jamie, I've thought about this a lot. Um, I spent part of my career as a filmmaker learning to, you know, create and write and produce. And I've often had this idea of creating something about my father. So I have had a chance to
Mm,
think about this
mm,
before. Um, m- my dad, he felt guilty about leaving me. And I believe that he spent the rest of his life making up for it. He was incredibly supportive. He was unconditional in his love. Um, and I never felt otherwise. But the thing I would have wanted most for him was for him, and I tried many times to express this, but I don't think he ever truly believed it, was that he did enough.
mhm.
And so, given the opportunity to tell that story about him, share that for him to be involved in that conversation, I would have wanted him to have seen how, like, how he was enough. Quite, I mean, and with all the examples,
Mhm.
and in telling the story, and in hearing from other people, and the examples, and seeing him in his element, and all the things that you would do telling that story and making that
Yeah.
film, that in that conversation with him, he could have seen that and believed it.
That's so beautiful. I have had this experience many times where there will be a central storyteller, let's say this time your dad,
Yeah.
and there's kind of a underappreciation from people who are not familiar with filmmaking of how important it is to have these other supporting voices,
Yeah.
that a person cannot fully tell their own life story because there are things they will never say about themselves, and
Sure.
perspectives and appreciations, insights about who they are. And other people have memories of moments where you impacted them that you completely didn't even notice when they were happening.
This is
Um,
exactly it. Yeah.
and so, what a beautiful thing. Thank you for bringing that up, because in the telling, let's say, if we were to make a film about your dad's life story, how important the other voices,
Yeah.
tellers, and memories would be, you among them, but others, to hopefully
Hmm.
give him that feeling,
I, th-
that truth.
yeah, exactly. There were moments, and I was lucky enough to see some of them. We had a retirement party for him when he retired from the Board of Education, and the people that showed up and the way they showed up, and he told me it was the greatest moment in his life.
Hmm.
And I think part of that is because he felt it. It was real because he didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to coordinate anything or lead the group or do the things that, probably in a certain way he'd been doing to get those things, to get that feeling, right? Um, so I know he had moments of it, but for me to tell him, "Hey, you were everything I needed," I it to your point earlier, he's not going to hear that from me. So yeah, different voices, different coming from different perspectives and places. That's
Yeah.
how I could see it happening.
Um, I definitely want to talk about how your dad's and who he is and ended up
Mm.
influencing you and your work. But last question before we sort of a little bit leave your dad, um, is, this scene of your dad folk dancing, the scene that I have in my mind of him at the flea market, these are
Mhm.
scenes, right? So if we're producing a
Yeah.
movie together, you and me, Perry, like those are scenes that he's not sit, people are not doing interviews. We're just
Right.
watching life happen. Apart from the flea market, which is would be an awesome film scene, by the way, the
Right.
bartering and everything.
Oh yeah.
I could just see your dad setting up his table and like, all the details. I'm sure he did it in a certain way. Um, and the folk dancing with all the costumes. I mean, it is just so rich.
Hmm.
But is there another scene when you think back to who he was that you're like, this is a private, intimate, ex like visual of my dad that I really just wish I could just see that again?
I left a lot, moved to other places, came back. Um, my son is 7. He was born in Costa Rica, where I spent the better part of a decade, and um, I didn't realize how important it was for me, for my father to know my son, and my son to know my father
Mm.
until a year or two in, and I was really feeling that miss missing relationship. Um, I have a picture of this somewhere. Uh, well, not somewhere. It's on my phone. uh, I keep it close at hand. There's a moment where he held Adam, my son, for the first time, and sorry, the the pure joy. I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen close to it because I knew he felt that way about me.
Mm.
Um, I wish there was more of that, and I would love to have more people have witnessed it. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
that's something that could we have captured it, more than that one photo, um, would be so powerful and special and important. People to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Um, your dad was diverse in his interests and kind of quirky
For sure.
and as I experienced him through your telling. And you have had such a diverse set of experiences in your life, like wild
Oh,
experiences from like holding your breath underwater, like deep diving almost to the point of death. What was that about? To, starting Canada's like biggest snowboard company, um and many, many other things.
yeah.
Um I'm wondering if you see a certain value that guided your dad or defined him in some way that you really see in who you are.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Um, my dad embodied, personified doing what you care about, what you love about. And what he cared about and loved about the most was, um, bringing people together and connecting with them. And as I said, I think I used the word medium, like these were vehicles for him. These were ways to do that. And he was
Mhm.
passionate, very passionate about folk dancing and the culture and the stories and what was behind it. But that driving force, that emotional driver, which I use that term a lot in my practice, is is very much to be able to connect. And that's what he desperately needed. And, no surprise, I am the same in that regard. And I think, yeah, it really gave me permission. It was just that I learned from him that it was okay to get the things you need. And if that means doing it over here and then doing it over there, that's okay. You don't have to be committed to one way. If that means um, learning and changing who you are and how you need to go through the world, that's okay too. So yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, it was hard in some senses because he did a lot of things that I didn't want to be. He wasn't able to stay married for very long, and I wanted to be married in an exclusive relationship, and I think he did too, but he could never make it work. He did finally spent, 25 years with someone in the end, and it was beautiful and wonderful, um and there's a lot that I learned from that relationship. But I wasn't around at the beginning, so I have to go through a lot of
Yeah.
stuff too. And
Yeah. Part
I
eight.
wanted,
Yeah.
yeah, like, I mean, wouldn't it be great if if we could emulate our parents' behavior in a healthy, great way? And not, people are people, they all have their struggles. So watching him go through that and make those mistakes and figure out who he was and who he wasn't was useful. And at the same time, left me a little bit searching for my own path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think I got off track here, Jamie.
No,
So
it's really, I think the question is, yeah, what value or, characteristic you feel like defined him and has been passed down to you, but it's also what wasn't there, right? I mean, it's the yin and the yang, it's the black and the white of it.
yeah.
So I think you're speaking to that. Um,
He taught me it was okay to be myself. And he taught me it was okay to not know what that is all the time. And so I learned how to reinvent myself over and over and over again. I did reinvent myself over and over again. And I did it knowing that I would have his full unconditional support. That meant everything.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that from where I'm sitting beautifully ties in to the work that you're now doing. One of the things you're now doing, but I think pretty major, which is acting as a thinking partner. I would also add heart partner,
Yeah.
um, with so many different folks, but basically, in your words, awesome people. So, entrepreneurs, literally rock stars, founders, maybe you'll add more to this list, but that you work with them in a one-on-one capacity generally.
Yeah.
Um, without going into like, huge specifics on your work, but I'm just really curious about what the core of your work is for you. What is it about ultimately?
I think it's the pursuit and understanding of the truth about who we are. And as referenced, I reinvented myself. I was skateboard guy and snowboard guy, I did lots of action sports things, and then I was in film and television, and then I was a musician and an athlete and in so many different industries and practices, because those were the things that I was curious about, and I wanted to know what I was capable of in each of these arenas. And to get access to, I had to become those things. And that was this identity, invention, reinvention, recreation. As I said, I think my dad helped make that possible for me in a very meaningful way. I believe there's an indelible truth to who we are. I think this is what we were born to do. I think this is why we are here right now in the world. I think this is what the world needs from us. And it's not contextual, but we are so conditioned to think of things contextually. So the benefit of having reinvented myself so many times to get access to see what I'm capable of on my own right, help me understand, help me differentiate between what's indelible and what's not. If you strip away all the layers, what are you left with? And so I've created a practice for myself that has allowed me to help other people get to that place. And once we can recognize it and articulate it, then we can recontextualize it. So I call myself a thinking partner. I'm a coach. I'm an advisor. I play a lot of different roles in the relationship with my clients to be able to truly unconditionally support them in that discovery and then that application. So whatever that is they want to do, they see themselves and want to express themselves as a business person or as a rock star or as an athlete, or the different arenas that I am blessed to be able to play in at a very high level. It still is the same thing. Is
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So that's the partner that I am. That's the partner role that I play. And my job is to provide unconditional support in being that reflection and being that objective perspective, um, being able to say what other people wouldn't say, what no one else is going to tell you. And then I've been, again, really fortunate and lucky because of all the things I've done. I've sat in the chair, been the CEO, been the artist, been the athlete, been in the role close enough to be able to understand what it's like to be there and to be able to support the person in the working through these things. Does that make sense?
100%. And I'm wondering as I'm hearing you share that, because it is a kind of uh priest role. It's a kind of e- elder role in a sense.
It's
Um
There's mentorship,
there's
there's
mentorship,
partnership,
there's partnership.
there's all of the things, and it requires the flexibility to move through the stages of the work and the reality that the person has
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the moment they need it, right?
Right, right. And what I'm actually curious about, just coming to my mind now, is that's so much giving, right? When you're in that role. And I'm curious what you
Mm.
do that nourishes you so that you can give that of yourself.
Okay. This is what allows me, this is my calling. So the truth is that the the intimacy of a relationship like this is what feeds me.
It is
It,
nourishing in itself.
it's nourishing in itself. And so I very much get what I need being able to do this work, being able to show up this way
Mm.
is that. And then there's an external part, which is I still also need to go have these adventures. And
The next adventure.
whatever that happens to be,
Yeah.
right? What's the next version of myself? What's the next thing I want to see what I'm capable of in that arena? And I mean, albeit I'm not risking my life like I used to on a regular basis, and that's probably a really good thing. Um, doesn't mean that I still am content to just be there for other people. I need to go out and do those things, and that's what gives me more experience and more fodder and more context to be able to relate with people and for them to relate with me. And
Yeah.
and quite frankly, anytime I've ever put myself out there as a coach or advisor or consultant or any whatever label you want to put on these things, because it isn't any one thing, that's never worked. People come into my orbit when they're in transition, and they come into my orbit because of something they've seen me do or know of me,
Right.
right? The fact that I've done those things is what brings them in the first place. So it's almost, I've come to realize that it's folly to even market myself. The only thing that actually matters is to go out and do what I need to do
To be you.
to be me, And then as a result, people show up and go, oh my gosh, that's really cool. It's not that they want to do the same thing. And yes, there's a certain vicarious to it at times, but it's like, wow, because you did that, that means maybe I can do it too, or maybe you're the kind of person I want to talk to.
Right. Right.
So it's self-serving in a way, but it's self-serving because it allows me to express myself in all the ways, whatever that happens to be right now. And as a result, it attracts the right kind of people.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, I find it so interesting and beautiful that your son has been woven through this story naturally
Mm.
and I think critically, because he is sort of this critical component, right? And particularly about the conversation we're having, which is around who we remember, where we came from, the meaning of that, and the legacy that we're creating
Mm.
and instilling and leaving behind. And so, um, in closing, I'm wondering if you can talk about, maybe through the eyes of how this will be given to Adam, um,
Mm.
the legacy that you really truly are creating, you hope, for yourself and wanting to leave behind.
Yeah. The thing that I want most for Adam now is for him to feel comfortable to be whoever he needs to be. And the thing I want most for him in the future is for him to know that that is always going to be um, accessible and available and just right. So there's a certain, I just used this word earlier, there's kind of selfishness in this, right? We're like reserving the right to do what you want to do and need to do and be who you are. But I really think that that's, if you don't know who you are and if you aren't secure and happy with yourself, and if you don't have grounding with that, then inevitably we use relationships around us to make up for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's healthy. So there's kind of like a put your mask on first thing to this. And yes, there's gray area that you got to be a little bit careful with, and ego and all the rest of it. But also just to know that being who you are is enough and is what the world really needs. To me, that's really important. And I want nothing more than that for him, because I think, as I've discovered, living that truth is what makes great things happen.
What a beautiful ending. Barry, I could talk to you for hours,
Yeah,
but I
likewise.
think we'll have to leave it there. I have completely enjoyed learning a little bit about your dad, and I look forward to
Yeah.
talking more about him the next time we chat, because what an incredibly interesting guy.
Mm.
So thank you for sharing him with me and with our listeners.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate this. It means a lot for me to do this.
My pleasure.